Friedrich Nietzsche was not just a philosopher. He was a prophet of the collapse of God, of morality, of herd values. When he declared, "God is dead," he wasn't merely rejecting religion. He was delivering a death sentence to every system that had once claimed power over the human soul: religious dogma, moral absolutes, and the suffocating influence of collective norms. To Nietzsche, these systems had lost their vitality. They no longer inspired greatness. Instead, they promoted obedience, guilt, and conformity. Humanity, he believed, had become domesticated, trained to follow rather than to create. In place of the wild, free, and daring spirit, society had raised docile citizens who measured their worth by how well they obeyed. Nietzsche's philosophy is a call to arms, a philosophical revolt against passive existence. He warned that with the death of God, humanity would face a terrifying freedom, a vast emptiness where old values once stood. But this void, he argued, was not a tragedy. It was an opportunity. In that vacuum, the individual is called to rise not by clinging to outdated ideals, but by forging new ones. Nietzsche did not preach destruction for its own sake. He believed that only by tearing down false idols could we begin the sacred work of building anew. His was a philosophy of self-overcoming, where each person must become the author of their own values, their own meaning, and ultimately, their own life. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch is not a fantasy of perfection. It is not the polished hero of mythology or the invincible figure of comic books. It is something far more radical and far more human. The Übermensch is a call to those who dare to walk away from the inherited shadows of society. To those who are brave enough to confront the death of old meanings, the crumbling of religion, tradition, and imposed morality, and who have the will to begin again, from nothing. This is not evolution through comfort. It is transformation through fire. The Übermensch is not born through obedience, but through rebellion. Not the loud, chaotic kind, but the silent, internal rupture that comes when a person finally refuses to live a borrowed life. It is the one who dares to ask, "What if I could build my values from within, rather than inherit them from the outside?" To be Übermensch is to confront the void and not run. It is to stare into meaninglessness and, rather than collapse into despair, rise with the fierce determination to craft new meaning from one's own soul. In a world that offers scripts, the Übermensch writes poetry. In a culture that rewards conformity, the Übermensch chooses creation. But it is not an easy path. Nietzsche never promised glory without suffering. He knew the price of freedom is solitude. That becoming yourself might mean losing the comfort of belonging. The Übermensch walks alone not because they reject humanity, but because they refuse to be reduced by it. This isn't about arrogance. It's about authenticity. The Übermensch doesn't seek to dominate others. They seek to master themselves, to rise above their instincts, to make peace with their chaos, and to transform pain into power. This is spiritual alchemy, turning inner struggle into strength, turning existential emptiness into a canvas for meaning. In a world where people chase applause, the Übermensch listens for inner resonance. In a world hungry for validation, they choose alignment. Their life is not dictated by dogma or fear, but sculpted by will, by vision, and by the courage to face life naked and unshielded. Nietzsche's Übermensch is not a destination. It is a direction, a perpetual becoming, a sacred rebellion against mediocrity, and a return to the self as creator, not consumer of truth. If the Übermensch is Nietzsche's vision of humanity reborn, then the path to that becoming is mapped through three symbolic stages of transformation: the camel, the lion, and the child. These are not random metaphors, they are psychological blueprints for those who dare to evolve. The camel is the first form, the obedient self. It kneels, it carries. It accepts the weight of inherited values, morality, religion, tradition, duty. The camel says yes to everything it's been told to bear because that is what it has been praised for. Strength, in this stage, is measured by endurance, but Nietzsche warns us, this kind of strength can become a prison. If you carry everything without questioning it, you forget what you truly stand for. The camel survives, yes, but it does not create. Then comes the lion, the roaring spirit of rebellion. Here, the individual awakens to their chains. The lion says no, not out of spite, but out of necessity. It fights old gods, defies imposed truths, and breaks free from the illusions that once defined it. This is the stage of confrontation with culture, with authority, and with one's own conditioned self. But rebellion alone is not enough. The lion can destroy, but it cannot yet build. And so emerges the final form, the child. The child is the spirit of pure becoming. It plays, it imagines, it creates. Unlike the camel and the lion, the child is not reacting to the past, it is inventing the future. It is innocence reborn as power, not naive, but free. Free to shape meaning not from rebellion, but from inner truth. The child is the artist of life, unburdened and unafraid to say yes to existence again, but this time on its own terms. But this transformation comes at a cost. To move from camel to lion to child requires what Nietzsche calls a psychological death. The ego, shaped by conformity and fear, must dissolve. This is not a metaphorical rebirth, it is a collapse of all you've been told you must be. And that collapse, it hurts. It strips away certainty. It can feel like madness, but in that void, something sacred emerges, freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the deeper freedom to become who you truly are. When you let the camel's burdens fall, when you let the lion's rage calm, the child within awakens not to escape reality, but to recreate it. In this, Nietzsche doesn't offer comfort, he offers fire. But through that fire, a new self is forged not as a servant of tradition, nor a slave to rebellion, but as a sovereign creator. And that, he believed, is the only path worth walking. Nietzsche's Übermensch is not merely a lofty ideal locked in dusty philosophy books. It is a call to arms for the soul, especially today, in a world where distractions multiply, values splinter, and identity often dissolves in the noise of conformity. To live as an Übermensch, the 21st century, is not to chase perfection, but to wake up, and to dare to live awake in a culture addicted to autopilot. It starts with this, the courage to leave the default path. In an era where ease is sold as success and consumption as happiness, walking the path of the Übermensch means turning away from comfort as a compass. It means asking the difficult questions most would rather avoid. Who am I beneath the roles I perform? Whose values am I living by? The Übermensch does not follow trends, they transcend them. To embody this spirit today is to reject the templates offered by media, culture, and even well-meaning tradition. It is to stop living a second-hand life. It means taking full responsibility for your values, your direction, your definition of success. Not blaming society, not waiting for rescue, but standing sovereign in the face of chaos. And that sovereignty is not reckless, it's disciplined. Nietzsche was not calling for rebellion without form, but for the deepest kind of self-mastery. The Übermensch lives by inner law. They are guided by a truth forged in solitude, not borrowed from consensus. They are creative, not just artistically, but existentially, sculpting meaning, rather than passively receiving it. This demands not just courage, but a radical honesty, the willingness to confront your own shadows, limitations, and illusions. In a time when image is curated and depth is outsourced, the Übermensch dares to be real, not as a performance, but as a practice. In today's fractured world, where algorithms shape thought, and belonging often requires self-erasure, the Übermensch is more than a concept. It is an act of spiritual resistance. To live as one is to become a lighthouse, not a follower. To walk alone if necessary, not out of pride, but out of principle. And to know that greatness is not granted. It is built, breath by breath, choice by choice, on the foundation of fierce self-knowledge and unwavering integrity. At the peak of Nietzsche's philosophy stands a quietly radical idea, amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive acceptance, not blind optimism, but a fierce, mature affirmation of life as it is, with all its pain, chaos, and unanswered questions. If the Übermensch is the one who dares to live by their own values, then amor fati is the soul's deepest discipline, to embrace everything that happens, not as a burden, but as raw material for transformation. Not merely bear what is necessary, Nietzsche wrote, but love it. In a world obsessed with control, escape, and ideal conditions, this teaching sounds almost heretical. We are taught to chase pleasure, avoid discomfort, and believe that happiness lies in changing our circumstances. But Nietzsche challenges this at its core. Because what if the circumstances don't change? Amor fati says, then you change your relationship to them. You stop asking why me, and start asking what now. You stop fighting the past and begin forging meaning from it, not to justify suffering, but to transcend it. This is not about glorifying trauma or romanticizing hardship. It's about turning pain into power, not by denial, but by integration. It is the difference between being broken by life and being tempered by it. In this, amor fati becomes the spiritual engine of the Übermensch. Because to create new values, to shape a life of freedom and authenticity, you must first stop wishing life were different. You must meet it as it is and still choose to say yes. In the modern world, fractured, unpredictable, full of noise and uncertainty, this is the antidote. Not retreat, not numbness, but radical engagement. When you embrace amor fati, you reclaim your power. You are no longer a victim of life's randomness, you become its co-creator. Even the worst day is not wasted, it becomes part of your art, your myth, your becoming. This is Nietzsche's final invitation. Love your fate, not because it is easy, but because it is yours. Own your story, burn your scripts, transform your scars into symbols. Because only when you stop running from life do you begin to truly live it. Nietzsche never described the Übermensch as a perfect, divine being. He never offered it as a final goal to reach. Instead, it is an ongoing personal journey, one that demands the courage to step beyond conformity, walk into chaos, and continually rebirth oneself from the inside out. This path isn't for the masses. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It unfolds in silence in the private, painful moments when you refuse to live by others' expectations and begin to ask, who am I when there's no mask left to wear? The strong man is not the one who dominates others, but the one who masters himself. Nietzsche's words weren't about control over the external world, but about inner sovereignty. The power to be honest, disciplined, and self-responsible in a world that rewards distraction and performance. To become Übermensch is not a proclamation. It's a daily discipline of awakening, of shedding borrowed beliefs, stepping away from illusions, and choosing to live with clarity and inner fire, even if no one sees you. This person doesn't wait for a savior. They become the creator of their own meaning. They don't escape fate, they love it. They don't chase validation, they honor their soul. Übermensch is not a final form, it's a choice made again and again. And in that choice, we find the only freedom that truly matters.